Today, let's explore together how to approach excessive responsibility and the heavy burden that comes with feeling like everything is somehow your fault. If you find yourself constantly taking blame for situations beyond your control, or believing that you must fix every problem around you, know that you're not alone. This pattern, known as hyperresponsibility, affects many people and has been extensively studied by researchers who found effective ways to develop a more balanced relationship with responsibility. Understanding hyperresponsibility begins with recognizing what current research tells us about this psychological pattern. A research institution's systematic review found that hyperresponsibility is recognized as a central feature of various mental health conditions, particularly obsessive-compulsive disorder. Studies show that many people with these patterns struggle with an excessive sense of personal responsibility for other people and situations that aren't fully within their control. Current research suggests that this pattern develops when individuals operate under what experts call inflated responsibility beliefs. These beliefs create a sense that if something can go wrong, and you have any ability to influence it, then you become morally responsible for preventing it. Research teams have identified that people with hyper-responsibility often live by the motto, "If I can, I should," which creates tremendous pressure and guilt when they can't meet these impossible standards. According to multiple universities' joint research, hyperresponsibility involves feeling overly responsible for situations, events, or outcomes that are beyond reasonable control. The research characterizes this as believing that if you don't do everything in your power to prevent, solve, or correct a problem, then you're morally at fault for causing that problem to occur. This creates what researchers describe as a cognitive trap, where normal life events become sources of guilt and self-blame. Brain imaging studies conducted by research institutions reveal fascinating insights into how hyperresponsibility manifests neurologically. When people with excessive responsibility beliefs encounter potential problems, their brains show heightened activity in areas associated with threat detection and error monitoring. This heightened neural response helps explain why hyper-responsible individuals often feel physically anxious when they perceive they might be letting someone down or failing to prevent a negative outcome. Recent findings from an international research group show that perfectionism research has evolved significantly. Current studies redefine perfectionism as a form of cognitive control that can be both beneficial and harmful, depending on its expression. The research identifies two key components: setting high-performance standards and having excessive concerns about making mistakes. When the concern about mistakes becomes overwhelming, it can drive hyper-responsible behaviors as people try to prevent any possible negative outcome. Research teams studying cognitive patterns have found that hyper-responsible individuals operate under perfectionistic rules that expect them to go above and beyond normal expectations in order to be loved, respected, and accepted by others. This creates what experts call a responsibility spiral, where taking on more responsibility feels like the only way to maintain relationships and self-worth, but actually increases anxiety and exhaustion over time. Let's explore some scientifically backed methods for developing a healthier relationship with responsibility. The first approach is called the responsibility radius exercise, and it's effective because it helps your brain distinguish between different levels of control. This method works by engaging your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for rational thinking, to override automatic guilt responses that often operate below conscious awareness. To practice this method, draw 3 concentric circles on paper. The inner circle represents things you have complete control over: your thoughts, actions, words, and responses. The middle circle contains things you can influence but not control, such as relationships and work outcomes through your effort. The outer circle includes things completely outside your control, like other people's choices, natural events, and past events. When you notice yourself taking responsibility for something, consciously categorize it into one of these circles. The key is to redirect your energy only toward the inner 2 circles, as research shows this reduces anxiety while maintaining healthy accountability. The second method is the 24-hour rule for responsibility claims. This technique is effective because it interrupts the automatic thought patterns that lead to excessive responsibility taking. When your brain is in an emotional state, it tends to jump to conclusions about responsibility and blame. By implementing a waiting period, you allow time for more rational brain regions to engage in the decision-making process. When you notice yourself taking responsibility for something, implement a 24-hour waiting period before accepting that responsibility. During this time, ask yourself specific questions. Did I directly cause this through my intentional actions? Is this within my reasonable sphere of control? Would I hold a friend responsible for this in the same situation? Research shows this cognitive pause allows the prefrontal cortex to engage rational thinking rather than automatic guilt responses, leading to more balanced assessments of actual responsibility. The third approach is the responsibility inventory technique, which helps calibrate your internal responsibility radar over time. This method is effective because it creates conscious awareness of patterns that usually operate automatically. Studies on metacognition show that simply becoming aware of our thinking patterns is often the first step toward changing them. Each evening, write down 3 things you took responsibility for that day. For each item, rate from 1 to 10 how much control you actually had over the outcome. Items rating below 7 should be examined for hyper-responsibility patterns. Over time, this practice helps you notice when you're taking responsibility for things outside your control, and it gradually trains your brain to make more accurate assessments of your actual influence over outcomes. The fourth method involves what researchers call collaborative responsibility language. This technique is effective because language literally shapes neural pathways, and changing how we talk about responsibility can change how we think about it. Studies on cognitive reframing demonstrate that word choice can influence both emotional responses and behavioral patterns. Practice using phrases that acknowledge shared responsibility rather than taking full blame. Instead of saying, "It's my fault," try, "I contributed to this situation." Instead of, "I should have prevented this," use, "This was influenced by multiple factors, including some outside my control." This language acknowledges your role without accepting total responsibility for complex situations that involve multiple contributing factors. The fifth approach is the self-compassion boundary setting method. This technique is effective because it activates different neural networks than self-criticism. Research on self-compassion shows that treating yourself with kindness actually promotes better decision-making and emotional regulation than harsh self-judgment. When you notice hyper-responsible thoughts, practice speaking to yourself as you would to a beloved friend facing the same situation. Ask yourself, "What would I tell someone I care about in this exact situation?" This perspective shift helps you apply the same rational, compassionate standards to yourself that you naturally use with others, breaking the cycle of excessive self-blame and unrealistic expectations. To summarize what we discussed today, first, hyper-responsibility is a recognized psychological pattern that affects many people, not a personal character flaw or moral failing. Understanding this can help reduce self-judgment about these tendencies. Second, your actual control extends only to your own thoughts, actions, and responses to situations. Recognizing this boundary is essential for mental well-being. Third, shared responsibility is more realistic than total personal accountability in most life situations, as most outcomes involve multiple contributing factors. Fourth, self-compassion breaks the cycle of excessive guilt and blame-taking by engaging healthier neural pathways than self-criticism. Fifth, healthy boundaries around responsibility protect both your well-being and your relationships by preventing burnout and resentment. Sixth, implementing responsibility practices consistently helps retrain your brain to make more accurate assessments of your actual influence over outcomes. Remember that developing a balanced relationship with responsibility is a gradual process that requires patience with yourself. These patterns often develop over many years and won't change overnight. Many people find it helpful to start with just one technique and practice it consistently before adding others. The goal isn't to become irresponsible, but to find a sustainable middle ground where you can be accountable for your actions without carrying the weight of the entire world on your shoulders. If today's discussion provided any insight or support for your journey toward balanced responsibility, please hit the like button to help others who might be struggling with similar patterns find this content. If you'd like to continue learning about mental health and developing healthier thinking patterns together, please subscribe to our channel. May your hearts feel a little lighter knowing that you don't have to carry responsibility for everything around you. Thank you for listening until the end today, and remember that learning to set healthy boundaries around responsibility is an act of wisdom, not selfishness.